Before I even begin, though, I want to introduce my partner in all of this work, and this is Sam Panbrum. Sam, would you please stand up?
Hello.
Yes. Sam and I have worked on this project. I started in '96. Sam and I linked up a couple of years after that, and we researched for, it's been 28 years or something like that we've been working on this. And I would make a trip over here every maybe once or twice a year, and we spend a couple of days wandering around the back roads. We literally didn't have a starting point. This is one of the things that's interesting about this, is there was no starting point. Usually you have a kind of an approximate map that you can use. Well, we did finally find one, but for a long time we were just stumbling around in the wheat fields trying to locate some traces that we could identify as the trail. So let me begin my presentation here. The National Trail System Act was established in 1977, and I've highlighted a couple of items here that they were given guidance in doing that is to identify the routes most used as a wagon road. And then they also were told to simplify future route marking and public information. They only allowed 3 routes. Now we in OCTA like to think of the trails as being a braided rope with both ends of them having collection and distribution points with more or less a single line in between. But as time has gone on, we came to realize that it's an unraveling rope for the entire length. You really have to search through it. So this limitation to a single route, and the 3 alternates are the Sublet and the Idaho and the Barlow are the 3 alternates that are allowed. And so this is a severe limitation, and as a result, the route to the Whitman Mission, which as we will see, was the original route of the Oregon Trail, and by that I meant the one that was used between 1843 and 1847, maybe lighter use a little bit before that. But the original route was to the Whitman Mission, out due west out to the Columbia River, and then down the Columbia River. Now, I'm going to dispose of one thing. If you follow Highway 11 through Milton Freewater, going up to Walla Walla, you will find they claim that is the route of the Oregon Trail. And we've come to conclude that it is a route, and it's probably the later route. People started moving into that area in the 1860s, and then it became the main route. But again, what I'm going to show you now is the original route to the Whitman Mission, and it's quite different. Why is this important? Well, as I said, it's the first route of the Oregon Trail, and significant numbers, not significant when you compare them to the numbers in the California Gold Rush, but significant number of immigrants, 8,000, took this route between 1843 and 1847. And the Whitmans provided life-saving support for the late season immigrants. They weren't real happy that all these people showed up and literally ate them out of house and home over the winter, having left too late from the Missouri-Kansas area. And finally, the story of the Whitmans and their mission, it's a key element in the story of the conflict between Euro-Americans and indigenous peoples. That's a subject we could spend a symposium on ourselves. So I'm not going to dig into that. I'm really talking about a mapping effort here. I want to demonstrate how OCTA does mapping using the MET manual, the guidelines that are in the MET manual for finding trail. As I said, the route to the Whitman Mission was not included in the original trail. We've had a 25-year effort by OCTA to add this route. It was included in a submission by OCTA and is now sits awaiting congressional approval. It's one of 26 trails. A lot of them are the raveling trails on both ends. So it is now recommended for inclusion. We're working hard to get the congressional action. It's been a struggle to get sponsorship and pandemics and all those things going on, but we are making some progress with that. But again, if you have a close tie with your local congressman, please let us know. This study was used as part of the justification for the trail and the feasibility study conducted by the National Park Service. So where is the route? It's taking a long time to get here. This is a picture of the Whitman Mission, or where the Whitman Mission was. You can see some kind of gray or tan faded areas in the grassy area, which are the outlines of the original building there and the mill pond. So let's just quickly go through the Whitman history there. It was established in 1836 by Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. It was a Presbyterian mission to the Cayuse Indians. From 1843, the immigrants became a distraction, I say, to the Whitmans from their missionary work. They did not succeed in their missionary activities, not for that reason alone, but it was a struggle all the time. The Whitmans were killed by Indians on November 29th, 1847. The Whitmans and 11 others were killed. 47 were taken hostage. And again, there's a whole story about that and different interpretations of that that I will not be going into today. Probably the most common, but certainly not the only explanation for that, was Dr. Whitman did act as a medical doctor. He treated the Euro-Americans for measles and was successful. He was treating the Native Americans for measles and they died. And so without an understanding of the infectious diseases, the Indians thought that he was killing their people, basically. That's one explanation. Again, not the only one. Again, this is actually a National Park Service map. The Whitman Mission is up there. You can see the trail, no trail going to the Whitman Mission on any of these maps. This is the trail in Oregon. Just by way of maybe justifying the fact that this was an original route of the Oregon Trail, this is a letter from 1930 with the covered wagon centennial, and it was just exchanging information, but in the contents there it says from Fort Boise to Fort Walla Walla. This is the Fort Walla Walla that was on the Columbia River, not the one in Walla Walla today, and then from Fort Walla Walla to Vancouver. So in 1930, that was the interpretation. That's the way the trail went. I would point out that this letter is on the stationery of the Oregon Trail Memorial Association, the president of which is Howard Driggs, which is Camille's stepfather, correct? So these stories all come together. So that's just one little additional piece about why the trail went to this location. Now, OCTA's trail finding methodology is explained in detail in the Met Manual. Copies of that are available online through the OCTA website. You can download a PDF. I'm not going to try to explain all of this, but I think you can get a flavor of what do we do when we don't even know where the starting point is, where you're starting to look. Well, the 4 C's, the late Don Buck, I think, put together this. He defined, looking at the 4 C's, first of all, there's coherence. Things have to fit together. If you find this wonderful 2-track out in the middle of nowhere with nothing leading into it or nothing leading out of it, that's not strong evidence. There should be a documentation, the second point, corroborative, collateral evidence, physical, if you do find trails or swales, that's of course important, not a proof by itself. And then all these things have to correlation, all these things have to fit together. And the result, though, is probability. It's not certainty. So I'm going to say everything that I'm talking about today has a probability, and I think there's a probability associated with every trail. We like to think this is the trail and this is not the trail, but maybe they're both the trail. So keep in mind, I'm not claiming that this is the only route. It is a probability. And we have to recognize that there are year-to-year variations. The immigrants were always trying new cutoffs that didn't work, it seems. And then climate, the wet year, dry year would cause them to go different ways. And then over the course of 20 years, there are going to be improvements. The first ones through made no improvements other than to move things out of the way a little bit. But then slowly things were done. So that's kind of the way we tie things together. And again, there's much more information on this in the manual. The tools that we use, the immigrant diaries, we have a pretty good collection in this area. We've used the expedition of Colonel George Wright in 1858 because he had an excellent mapper, Theodore Kalecki. And here we did find some starting points. It's not a continuous line, but we pick up enough segments that it allows us to bring things together. And they do meet this criteria of fitting together. One of the great journals that's available is Winfield Scott Eby's journal. This was edited and published by Susan Badger Doyle and Fred Dykes. And Eby was a remarkable diarist. Measured everything. I don't know how you can measure things so precisely with the technology they had available in those days, but he did, and we can check his mileage and compare with it. We have the General Land Office survey maps from the 1860s. That's the first mapping that was done here, was in the mid-1860s. And then you can just do topographic analysis. We work at the highly detailed 1 to 24,000 scale maps that show where the hills and ravines and where they're located. And we know the kind of decisions immigrants made on how they traversed a hill. They avoided canyons, just putting that together. And then what Sam and I did with field research and evidence looking for it. Again, this is a combination of how these things all fit together that ends up helping to define the trail. Now, if you look at those dates, we have diaries that go back to 1843. Colonel Wright's expedition through here was in 1858. Winfield Scott Eby's diary was in 1854. GLO maps were in 1860s. The rest works out, but you can see we're getting most of our evidence is after the period we're looking at, 1843 to 1847. And so that you can associate a probability of whether we had that right on that point. But I think the evidence that we've extracted from there, you can be pretty sure that it reflects information that was available and reflects routes that were used in the 1840s. You'll see it, and you can make your own decision about that. Again, we don't have maps that were drawn in 1847 or 1845. So this is the overall area that we're looking at, and I put these little stars here as kind of anchor points. So down at the bottom is Dead Man Pass. So you're up on old US 30 or I-84 up at the top of the hill there. They came down from Dead Man Pass to the Cayuse village at the base of the hill. And the modern, designated Oregon Historic Trail goes due west, pretty much due west to Pendleton, and then on to Echo, John Day, and the Dalles. And we have some other points that come out of these diaries and documents that we have, like Wild Horse Creek, Eby's Big Hill. He very carefully describes a big hill and a river canyon that he goes into. Milton Freewater, just as a reference. The Mojanier Ford was one that was used by almost everybody. You can go back to the early Hudson Bay, to the fur trapping trade, and they all focus on crossing at that ford. The Walla Walla Valley was very wet, and that whole southeast corner of it is really a marsh. You don't see that today. It's been drained and dried, and it's an area with a lot of vineyards in that area now. But that was pretty much a point. If you were going to go in that direction, you cross the river at that point. The Hudson Bay Company had a farm there on Pine Creek, and we have the mission up there, and then the Whitmans in 1836. Narcissa pretty clearly identifies where they camped. She talks about, and they didn't travel the Oregon Trail, they were a little bit to the east there of the Cayuse villages. But she describes coming down in Chuck Hornbuckle and has done some work in that area. I'm missing John's. I'm missing a name there, but anyway. They describe them going through the blues, but when they get to the base of the blues, which is where the green stops there, they said, well, we got on our horses and we rode all day long, and then she said we camped about 8 miles above the fort on the river, and that's the Whitman campsite there. But there's nothing that identifies what went on between those two events, because it's easy country. It's wheat fields today, fairly level, easily ascended hills where there are hills. So I'll jump right to the end here. This is the result of all our studies, and I'll suffer you to go through the details with me after this. But let's look at the results as they are now. No, I didn't want to do that. So we start again at Dead Man Pass, comes down the hill to Cayuse Springs, and I hope you can see that. Onto the Umatilla River crossing. The black line with the yellow highlighting is what we call the route to the Whitman Mission. So it's going almost due north from Cayuse, straight on up to the Whitman Mission, M19 up there at the top. These were codes I used to keep track of things. It then turns west, goes to Tucci Creek, and then to that Whitman camping area at M22, and then on over to the fort, which is in the McNary Reservoir now. The green line, EB didn't go that way, but EB traveled in 54, and the Whitmans were killed in 47. He notes where the mission is across the valley, and he talks about it, but we can, not precisely, but we know pretty much that's the green line is the way EB traveled going over to the same fort. The red line is the Oregon Trail going through Pendleton and on west. The dashed lines are some alternate routes that were used where we could identify them. But up there in the edge there, I mentioned Colonel Wright. We'll get back to that a little bit more. His expedition pretty much followed from Immigrant Springs Campground in the middle there on up toward the mission. He came back, and he did probably go through the Milton Freewater area coming back. So there was a route over there also. But it doesn't make sense to swing over there if you're going to go to the Whitman Mission. Again, it's uncertainties there. In doing our studies, though, we broke it up into 10 pieces so that we could work on a manageable piece each time we did it. So we have a Dead Man Pass to Cayuse, et cetera, et cetera. That's just, you'll see these numbers on the chart. And that's what they're just study segments, basically. So let's go back to Dead Man Pass. We're coming down Poker Jim Ridge. Is generally thought to be the most used route by all of the immigrants, whether they were going to the mission or out to Echo to the west. The dash routes are some alternates. The S3 route is a Canine Ridge route, and it definitely was used by some. So that's why they're shown on the map, not to exclude them. And river crossings probably occurred at more than one point. So we have Dead Man Pass right there as a starting point. And we go out to Cayuse. Those on the tour, we're visiting this spot. Unless the smoke blows away, it's not going to be as good as this. And this is a springtime Green Hill picture of the same area. But there's the descent right there. They come up. Dead Man Pass is over the top there, and that's the Poker Jim descent. The little green patch over there is Cayuse Springs, also sometimes called the Cayuse Post Office, where immigrants leave mail would be going back east. So that's the route coming, and there's not much argument about that, but there are variations in that area. So looking at the diary quotes on this same area, Same, Dead Man's just off this a little bit. And then going up the black yellow line, as I've said. So Nesmith is a good diary, and it is from 1843. So we've nailed it. We want to see what they were doing in 1843. And he says, we got underway and traveled 12 miles down the west side of the Blue Mountains. Now, that descent is not 12 miles that I showed you. That's, I think, 1 or 2 miles from what's visible. So it extends back. I think he might have been at Immigrant Springs campground up at the top on I-84. So he's coming down. He said he came 12 miles down the west side of the Blue Mountains where we struck the Umatilla River. Went 3 miles down it to camp near some Indian lodges. Now, so here's the Umatilla River crossing. I think those numbers kind of indicate that he did use that Kenai Ridge route, which is S3 on the right-hand side there, came down the river and maybe crossed the river. The 3 miles coming down matches up with that pretty well. So they cross and they're heading up to S4, Crawford Hollow, and on past that point. So let's look at this area. This is a really interesting area. The dashed line that you see that on this map is the route of Colonel Wright and his cartographer, Theodore Kalecki. So they came out of the Pendleton area. They were heading northeast, and so that's the route that they were following there. So let's look at this detail here. Again, looking at the Nesmith diary. Delayed sometime in camp this morning, started about noon on the trail to Dr. Whitman's, traveled 8 miles. So he's at the river crossing and he goes to a campground that's 8 miles away. And that is, you can measure that off along the route that we put, and the immigrant campground is right in the center there. Interesting thing is, he says, I joined with Otay and Haggard and went with carriages to Dr. Whitman's. This was not Whitman came out in his carriage to greet him, and then they got in the carriage and went. So that infers that there was a pretty good road structure already in place when the immigrants arrived. And to go back to the star that I showed you, the stars there, I think you could connect the dots with almost all those stars, and there was some kind of a road where people, either there were Indian camps or HBC facilities or whatever. So this worked out, the measurement, we kind of zeroed in on this area. There's the immigrant campground area. And now let me digress a minute and give a little background on Colonel Wright and Theodore Kalecki. Certain plateau tribes, plateau being the wheatlands up to the north of Walla Walla, did not sign the treaties in 1855 extinguishing their rights. I don't know why. Nobody wanted to do that. So Colonel Steptoe was sent out to do that, but he was defeated in battle. So this was Sam can tell this story much better, and I'm sure he will tomorrow. But he was defeated, so that made everybody mad in Oregon. So they sent out Colonel George Wright to punish the offending tribes. So that's who we're following, moving through this territory in 1858. And it was Colonel Theodore Kalecki who drew the maps as they went along, and they're just superb, the maps that he had. And these maps did contain some clues about the original trail going through that area. The maps were located by Malon Kriebel. He's a third member of our team. They were, I've seen reference that they were lost in the National Archives. I don't know the whole story of that, but anyway, Malon brought these maps to our attention, and they were a true breakthrough in terms of getting this route identified. So this is one of Kalecki's maps, and going on the diagonal, you can see there's a straight line, and you see the dashed line going from the lower left corner to the upper right, and that's Kalecki's route through the area, and it ends up in that little cluster up at the top. I forget what we highlighted here, Steve. Yeah, there's Kalecki's route going through the area. And you can see he has a little diversion. Well, this is the route coming out of there. If you could read that carefully, it says Old Road to Walla Walla. So it was the old road to Walla Walla in 1858. And so we have to extrapolate that back. Was that the road to Walla Walla in 1847 and 1843? And we've not found any alternative. I think it is. There's a little, on Kalecki's map, there's a little diversion. He mentions dropping down to the immigrant campground to see what's going on, check it out. So again, that zeroed in on our location of the immigrant campground. It's undeveloped. We've never searched that property. I haven't been on it, unless Sam might have been on it in the past, but our recent studies, we have not had access to that study. But it all comes together. Those are quarter-mile squares, and if you look at, and there's Kalecki's terrain contours on there, those lines, and I don't know how he did it. I don't know how you do that when you're just walking through the countryside and draw those contours, but they match. Now the road that coming up from the river crossing at Cayuse, he didn't show that. You see Wild Horse Creek in the middle there, and it's pretty much continuing the red line straight on down. So from the immigrant camping area. Now, Kalecki went on to where modern-day Athena is located, and then turned north and went up to crossing of Waterman Creek. The trail, though, takes a more direct route. There was no Athena. There was no reason to go there. And so a more direct route up to the Waterman Creek crossing in that area. So let's look at this a little more in more detail. This is Kalecki's same map of the area. One of the interesting things about Kalecki's maps is there's no top and bottom to them. One time you'll write the letters going one way, and then it flips over and it goes another way. So the labeling on the old road to Walla Walla is upside down in that in one area. It's coming in as we showed on the previous map. Colonel Wright and Kalecki went on to where Athena is now. They established Station 0, and they started surveying the route using range and bearing, and you see a straight line there. So they would get at a point in Station 0 where they were elevated. They'd look as far as they could see in the direction they were going to go, and establish a survey point at the last one. They measured the bearing of that line and the length of that line, and this is it's done step by step from Athena to Walla Walla. And I gathered that range and bearing data and plotted it on a map. I started at Station 0 and did that and plotted it on the map. And at the very end, I ended up in the parade grounds of Fort Walla Walla, which is exactly where it should have been. So the mapping is just amazing. It's the best proof that we have there. So that is 6 miles out to that point. But then they go to the next point and do the same thing over and over again. Here I've showed the immigrant route coming in from 43 to 47. So we're proceeding north now. Apologize about changing colors on you, black and chartreuse there. Right in the center of it is that Waterman Creek crossing, and then heading on north, pretty much north through there. There are some little references to GLO. They're actually, usually we rely on the section line crossings, but these GLO maps, if you look carefully, they have little segments, and when I plotted them, they fell right where they should. That's kind of unusual. You can't usually rely on the between the section lines. So let's blow that area up, and here's Kalecki's map of the same area, and he's coming in right where it says S5. They're coming in from the high. It's a kind of a high. You've ascended a little bit of high plain up there. You drop down into Pine Creek. That's the line that you see in the center there, down a hill into Pine Creek, and then actually they crossed Pine Creek and then ascended the hill on the other side. And then this, again, is Kalecki's map, and then starts the northern trek and then drops back into the Walla Walla Valley on the other side. Putting that same information on a modern map, this is Harvey Jones. Harvey Jones was with Eby and part of that same group, and he talked about being at the campground. Then he just traveled 18 miles and camped in the Walla Walla Valley, and then from there he has 15 miles on to crossing the Walla Walla River twice. The Walla Walla River is very braided in this area. It's kind of hard to tell when you're along the river or in a swamp. I'm sorry, I said that wrong, because this is Eby. What Harvey Jones said, he came down to where the black chartreuse line ends, and Eby went left at that point, and so he's following the black yellow line, which stays on the south side of the Walla Walla Valley. People going to the mission, and including, not to the mission, to Walla Walla, including Colonel Wright, came down into Pine Creek and made a left turn. And this puzzled us for a long time. He makes a left turn and backtracks. He's going up a hill at that point, gets up on the ridge line and travels the ridge line and then drops down to the valley. It kind of doesn't make sense. Why did he climb that hill? It's a good route though, and the other alternative would be to go the way that Eby did. The valley begins up there a little bit further. But they seemed to think it was worth climbing that hill, and I've seen that in other locations. So the numbers work out when you measure the numbers quoted and where they did it. But that was kind of a breakthrough to figure out where this turn into the valley occurred. So going back to the top of the hill, this is what we see when we're going. I should have just a little bit out of sequence. I mentioned you come up out of Water Creek, you're going through the fields, and then you reach the top of the ridge and you drop down into Pine Creek. This is what we found at the top of the hill in an area that hadn't been cultivated. And this was found by the fourth member of our active team, Brian Van Borstel. And Brian is a farm worker out there. That's a farm manager. Not sure of the right terminology here. But anyway, he plows and sprays and plants and harvests and almost all the fields up there. He knows everybody. He knows where things are, and he was very helpful in getting access initially to some of these sites. And Brian was out working one day and plowing with his tractor, and he felt unevenness in the ground. He said, I don't know, why is this wiggling? And the tractor's working a little bit harder than it should be working. And he looked out, and this is what he saw. Not in this particular location, but within the field. So he went home, he pulls up his Google Maps, and once you know where to look, these swales are obvious. They just jump out at you, but we had missed them in our initial surveys. It's private land. Pine Creek area is private land. It's a great area. I would hope we gain access to it sometime in the future. That's Sam walking in the swales at the top of the hill, heading towards Pine Creek. Then when you drop down into Pine Creek, looking back at the hill, here you can see the top of the hill, and I'll blow that piece up, and this is what you see coming off the hill, are these swales zigging and zagging down the hill. Multiple, and you'd expect that in an area like this. So here we are. We are back on the hill, but we drop down in Pine Creek, and then heading towards the mission into the green line there. Actually, when you're on top there are two ways down the hill. Now, Colonel Wright's route goes down right where it says S6E, pretty much straight down, drops into the valley. And we were on Brian Borstel has a four-wheeler, so we could go out and drive down that hill. And we think we felt the swales as we were driving down the hill and moving back and forth. There was unevenness as we did that. We've been back out there several times at different times of the year, sometimes when it's new growth, sometimes when it's late in the fall and it's dry. It's very difficult to see. There are some lines that we've seen, and again, going back to Google Map and re-looking at it, there are 4 or 5 lines that look like they could be a trail coming off that same ridge. So this is the Pine Creek that we were talking about. It comes down, it goes out Pine Creek, and then the route that was followed that climbs the ridge across the way, that's that route. And when you get on top, this is the descent that's on the a little bit to the west. I didn't talk about that because it is so obvious. Still a good swale, obviously used by probably as a farm road or access road. And then there's this. We actually saw this for the very first time we went out, and I concluded, well, that can't be the trail. You know, it's too obvious. This is a farm road. You know, well, it's in the right place. It obviously has been used as a farm road, but it has all the characteristics of what you'd expect of an immigrant trail. It's not a straight line. It's curvy, wiggly, and it comes straight down the hill. It doesn't do any cycling as it doesn't. So I think that's evidence of another one of the descents down there.